Russian immigration, the continuous phenomenon. If you walk through the streets of modern-day Brighton Beach, Pikesville, Maryland, Lynn, Massachusetts, and so on and so forth, you can hear Russian and its various dialects being spoken, street signs and establishment logos written in Russian, and you can essentially get the feeling of what it's like to live in modern-day Russia. It seems like Russians are very comfortably settled in the United States. However, due to this, many people don't even wonder how Russian immigration came to be. So in this short film, I will explore that issue and its various side questions. The first Russian traders and missionaries reached Alaska from Siberia on trade ships in 1749. These ships were under the control of Vitus Bering and Alexei Chirikov. After this, the first permanent Russian settlement was established without official government approval on Kodiak Island in 1784 by Gregory Shelikov, who was a fur trader. And this enterprise would later on develop into being the Russian-American Company, which received a charter from the Russian government in 1799. Now that said, the main periods of Russian immigration, or in other words, waves, took place much later. The first massive wave of immigration happened in the second half of the 19th century and early 20th century, right before World War I. The majority of those immigrating were Jewish, looking for refuge after escaping the Pale of Settlement, which was a territory established in 1786. The Pale stretched from the Baltic to the Black Sea. Mary Anson, who immigrated to America in the 1890s, recalled, and I quote, "Within, the Tsar commanded me to stay with my father and my mother and friends and all the other people like us. We must not be found outside the Pale because we were Jews." And that is the end of the quote. So essentially, they were immigrating from Russia in order to escape continuous prosecution due to their religious beliefs and culture. At the time, America seemed to be a land promising religious and cultural freedom, which is what one might call America's pull factor. A quote from the Exodus of Russia states, and I quote, "At a sewing school in the Russian city of Minsk, Jewish girls received letters from America describing astonishingly high wages. The starting pay for a seamstress in New York was $4 a week, the sum equal to a month's earnings in rubles." And so with this, so to speak, invitation began the first wave. At the time, Jews were immigrating by boat, arriving in huge numbers, after which they settled mainly around New York and other large coastal cities. This remains the status quo to this day, however, more modern Russian immigrants are beginning to settle on the West Coast. When they arrived, they settled in tight communities and engaged in little to no interaction with American Jews. They perceived them as detached from their cultural roots. To say the least, the majority of Jewish Russian immigrants of the first wave were very conservative. But Jews were not the only demographic group immigrating from Russia during the first wave. Others included Russian Orthodox pacifist groups, which were conflicted with the Russian Orthodox Church, and among those groups were the Russian Molokans, and here we actually have a photo of a newly arrived group of Molokans. Now, they were pushed to leave Russia due to disputes with the church about their fasting habits, such as refusal to refrain from dairy. This particular issue is where the Molokans got their name, because the word for milk in Russia is moloko, and they settled primarily in Los Angeles and various parts of Oregon. The Molokan community remains in those areas to this day, and they are characterized by their emphasis on agricultural labor. This played a huge role in their decision to immigrate to America because at the time, America was perceived as this place where there was plenty of land and fertile soil for everyone. The second wave of immigration started in 1917 and ended around 1921. The push factor, so to speak, during the second wave was the Russian Revolution. The many attributes that accompany a revolution, such as poverty and property destruction, violence, political radicalism, and so on and so forth, forced over 2 million to flee to the United States. These people's social classes and professions ranged from low-wage teachers and shopkeepers to rather wealthy merchants, military personnel, and members of the clergy. They fled to America in pursuit of peace and refuge. The 2 million new immigrants settled primarily in New York, Philadelphia, Chicago, San Francisco, and Boston. They pursued professions similar to those that they had in their home countries. The third wave of Russian immigration came in the aftermath of World War II, during which millions of Europeans were displaced from their homes. This wave brought over 50,000 new Russians over to the United States. The lack of living quarters, terrible living conditions, prosecution, mass genocide, and similar factors served as the push factor, whilst the pull factor to America was once again the promise of freedom and peace and sanctuary and financial opportunity. But unlike the two previous waves, the third wave of Russian immigration was followed by mass deportation due to the fact that all Western powers, including the United States, were obligated to repatriate persons who were born on the Soviet territories, and the people who managed to avoid deportation were discriminated against and faced suspicions of being spies and agents, and people thought that they were sent to sabotage the American agenda. Russian immigration, like any other, has had its impacts on the United States. One of the many ways it's done this is by adding yet another culture and language to the cultural melting pot that America is. Not to mention, Russian immigrants were the people who, alongside Americans, built up and supported the timber, fur, oil, and similar industries, meaning that it played a huge role in the achievement of America's internationally recognized prosperity and wealth. But despite this, Russians faced the same problems of many immigrants from other countries at the time. One of many of their struggles included finding jobs. Many people refused to hire Russian immigrants because they thought that their wages would be sent abroad to their families and the money needed to be kept in the United States. In other words, those who fled from unemployment faced the exact same problem in the United States for a really long time. The slang term for immigrants at the time was greenhorns, meaning that they were new, inexperienced, and naive. However, over the years, they've come quite a long way. With whole Russian communities nationwide, their involvement in law, medicine, business, trade, and so on and so forth, Russians have become one of the largest European demographic groups in the country and have contributed to our country greatly.